Israel strikes Gaza Hamas sites after rocket attacks. Israel says it has targeted sites in Gaza belonging to militant group Hamas in retaliation for rocket strikes. Israel's military said it hit weapons sites early on Saturday. 2 people were killed, a Gaza hospital said, bringing the deaths at Israeli strikes and gunfire over the past day to 4. 3 rockets were fired at Israel from Gaza late on Friday. Israeli-Palestinian tensions have risen since President Donald Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Wednesday's decision reversed decades of U.S. neutrality on one of the most sensitive issues between the two sides. Israel has always regarded Jerusalem as its capital, while the Palestinians claim East Jerusalem, occupied by Israel in the 1967 war, as the capital of a future Palestinian state. The diplomatic fallout over Mr. Trump's move has continued, with Egypt's Coptic Church canceling a meeting planned this month with U.S. Vice President Mike Pence in protest. At a security conference in Bahrain, the UAE's Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Anwar Gargash said the Jerusalem announcement was a gift to radicalism, Reuters reported. Frank Gardner, counter-terror efforts at risk? In other developments, Israel's Air Force followed a number of raids on Hamas sites on Friday with more airstrikes in the early hours of Saturday, targeting weapons manufacturing sites, a weapons warehouse and a military compound, the Israel Defense Forces said. Gaza's Shifa hospital said that 2 bodies of Palestinians were found under the rubble of a Hamas military site bombed by Israeli planes overnight, bringing the death toll in the past 24 hours to 4, with 160 injuries. 2 Palestinians were also killed in clashes with Israeli troops at the Gaza border. Of the 3 rockets fired at Israel, Israel's military said it had intercepted one with its Iron Dome defense system, one was found on wasteland and another landed in Sderot late on Friday. No casualties were reported. Earlier on Friday, Fathi Hamid, a senior Hamas leader, said anyone seeking to move their embassy to Jerusalem was an enemy of the Palestinians. Speaking before the United Nations on Friday, U.S. Ambassador Nikki Haley said the U.S. recognizes the obvious, that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. She said the U.S. continued to be committed to achieving a lasting peace agreement, and accused the UN of bias, saying it has outrageously been one of the world's foremost centers of hostility towards Israel. Israel will never be, and never should be, bullied into an agreement by the United Nations or by any collection of countries that have proven their disregard for Israel's security, Mrs. Haley said. Israel had deployed extra battalions to the West Bank in anticipation of violence after Palestinian leaders called for protests after Friday prayers. At least 217 Palestinians were wounded in confrontations in the West Bank and East Jerusalem, Palestinian medics said. What are the alternatives to a 2-state solution? Why settlement issue is so difficult? There were protests held elsewhere on Friday against Mr. Trump's announcement. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters held demonstrations in Jordan, Egypt, Iraq, Turkey, Tunisia, and Iran. Further afield, protesters rallied in Malaysia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Indian-administered Kashmir and Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim-majority country. Why does Trump's announcement matter? Jerusalem is of huge importance to both Israel and the Palestinians. It contains sites sacred to the 3 major monotheistic faiths, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. Israel occupied the eastern sector, previously occupied by Jordan, in 1967, and annexed it in 1980, but the move has never been recognized internationally. Some 330,000 Palestinians live in East Jerusalem, along with about 200,000 Israeli Jews in a dozen settlements there. The settlements are considered illegal under international law, though Israel does not regard them as settlements but legitimate neighborhoods. According to the 1993 Israel-Palestinian peace accords, the final status of Jerusalem is meant to be discussed in the latter stages of peace talks. The last round of talks between Israel and the Palestinians broke down in 2014, and while the U.S. is formulating fresh proposals, Palestinian officials have said Mr. Trump's announcement has disqualified the U.S. from brokering future negotiations.